Hello again.
Good morning.
Hello. Does this feel good or does this feel good to you back here?
You know what I realized? This is like the season finale.
Yeah, it is like the season finale. In fact,
I
it's
have
what
to wait a little while for it, and then all of a sudden, here it is.
I know it's episode 40, actually. Can you believe that?
Mhm.
Because it's funny because less than a year ago, we knew that we wanted to start a podcast and we wanted to start putting things out there into the world. And here we are, and we've already done episode, or we're about to wrap up. We're starting episode 40, and we'll wrap it up shortly. And how amazing is it when we see something come to fruition, and when we have an idea and it aligns, and we're in alignment with the people that we are creating that idea, and we're bringing it into the world. It's a very powerful thing.
Mhm.
And speaking of very powerful things, we are today we're going to be talking about the title is about, it's called Why Old Leadership Development Programs Fail. But it's not really about those old leadership development programs, because they're behind us. We're going to be talking today rather about the reasons that leadership development has fallen short in 2024 for a lot of people. When they hear the words leadership development, it can bring up a lot of things for them. It can either be having to sit through painful seminars. When I remember my first introduction to leadership development was through books that were written by an older white man who used only sports analogies to talk about leadership.
Mhm.
And while those points were valid, it didn't connect with me on a "this is who I am" level. I did take
Mhm.
some of those strategies, and I have used them, but it was leadership is like many things. It's so much bigger than what the
Mhm.
word can mean for us.
Mhm.
So
Probably would have benefited
let's talk
more
about.
from so you probably would have benefited more. And thinking back, as I did kind of dove into
Mhm.
the same sort of leadership garbagey books at the same time, roughly, we probably would have done better to read history and biographies. You know,
Yes,
like
exactly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
because it was all just so schlocky back then, wasn't it? I
Lucky.
mean,
Well, it was written at a time when if you peeked into any boardroom in corporate North America,
Mhm.
it would look the same. There
Yeah.
would be 12 mostly white, tall men in suits, and they would be speaking the
Yeah.
same language
Yeah.
because they could speak it together, and
Yeah.
then the door would open, and the poor secretary would bring in her coffee. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what leadership looked like when those books were written. So no
unless you're
surprise.
Dynasty or Dallas or the Colbys, right? It's
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Exactly.
there were
Yeah.
a few strong women out there, but they were on TV
Yeah.
series.
So it
Mhm.
is interesting because there are ways, and just to set the record straight, we are today we're pointing out we're not poo-pooing on what people have done in the past. We're pointing out where it is, where we are recognizing and things are emerging, and we're going to be talking about that shortly.
Mhm.
In the world that we're in 2024. So here we are in 2024, but also not just the year or the date. It's about what's going on in the world, and the world that we're a
Mm.
part of, and what is emerging, and what is coming to the surface, and what life is calling us forward into as leaders, because everybody is a leader, right? So
Mhm.
leadership is not something elite. It's where you are right now. It's what your choices are. So let's talk first. I would love to hear from both of you about what are some of the ways that we recognize that leadership is leadership development or leadership training
Mhm.
is is no
Hmm.
longer meeting, uh, is no longer current
Mhm.
to where we're at now.
I think the emergency room analogy is probably good to throw in here,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Um, I think what all of us have seen over the past few years is this sensation that when people come into a coaching session or a leadership development session, it might be fine for that hour or those few hours that you're there. Feels a little bit like a triage. And then they go back out to the war zone, right?
Mhm.
Which is day-to-day working. And it's like it's like you come back with the same sickness. You come back with the same
Mhm.
injuries almost into the
Repeat.
emergency room,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
So I think that is kind of the evidence.
Mhm.
And I think you're right, Colin, that many people who lead professional development or coaches like us, we see the same thing that maybe people did see in the operating room in a war zone. Oh,
Yeah,
I patched this person up last week. Oh my
yeah,
goodness, look, now they've got this. And we are
yeah,
seeing it over and over again.
yeah.
But I want to start with some props actually to the whole HR industry.
Yeah.
Because in the last 40 years, what has developed is the realization that we do need leadership
Yeah.
training,
Yeah, that's true.
that we do need professional development.
Mhm.
So while I think we're still in early stages on that, it's something that wasn't even acknowledged 50 years ago. You
Oh,
became a leader because you were, I don't know, the kid you knew somebody or
Yeah.
you'd stayed long enough
Yeah.
or you
Yeah.
sure.
Or
got
you were in
promoted.
sales development because the company was dependent on you getting sales, and so there was lots of sales development training that
Mhm.
happened, but not so much about leadership and
I
definitely
think
not
you're
about
totally right. And we don't want to, it's so easy to look back at history and go, oh, well, look what they did, right?
Mhm.
And that was wrong and this is wrong. And I'm always asking the question, what are we doing today
Mhm.
that will be abysmal in 10 years, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely, you're totally right, Carol. But I think we all need to recognize that the world is dramatically
Oh,
changed.
yes.
And
Mhm.
whether it was the pandemic or something else, but it feels as though we are at that fourth turning, that end of an empire, that end of
Mhm.
an era.
Mhm.
There is I guess what I'm trying to articulate is it's no longer sort of it's an eyes wide open moment
Mhm.
that that everything has changed, everything has shifted. So absolutely no blame and no fault
Mhm.
looking back in the rearview mirror. But I think what we can do in our new sort of approach to coaching, and we're calling it coaching reimagined, right? And leadership
Yes.
development reimagined. And we're saying, let's all recognize that it's not business as usual. It
Oh,
can't be,
yes.
It can.
right?
And that's the relief, and that's what I
Yeah,
wanna invite us to do today is like
exactly.
we were talking before, it's like when we're all at a friend's house eating dinner, and everybody takes a bite of dinner and goes, isn't that yummy?" And then it goes around the table, and finally, perhaps it's the host who is as the guest to say, "This is actually perfectly awful. I'm sorry."
Abysmal.
And everybody goes, "Oh, thank heavens. Thank you for saying that out loud." So
Yeah.
here
Yeah,
we are saying out loud, "It's been okay, but thank heavens we
Yeah.
can now look at something else."
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So I think some of the ways that I look back, and I look back on leadership development kind of like how I look back on younger versions of myself. It's like I
Mm,
was doing the best I could with what I
yes.
knew at the time or what I had access to. As a parent, you want to have that love and that compassion for the younger version of you as a parent. And I think about that in terms of leadership development, just like many other things in the world.
Mhm.
Um, so some of the ways that I think that that leadership development programs are often fail, even today as we're sitting here. Some of them that I see out there and that I hear people talking about is when there's a focus on weaknesses rather than
Mhm.
strengths.
Mhm.
And even if it's not said overtly, if the focus is on how you can get better at this to do
Mm,
this better, there's it's still
yeah,
very exclusionary. It's a very binary way to look at
Mhm.
us rather than seeing ourselves as dynamic and evolving and multidimensional. It
Mhm.
sees it as this is the problem, and everything is still problem centric in how
Yes.
you're approaching your development.
Very
instead of
much.
focusing on genius and the brightness and the
Yeah,
best part of
yeah,
somebody,
and what's
right?
possible.
And what's
Mhm.
possible. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll never be a financial person, numbers, Excel
Mhm.
spreadsheet person, right? But in the past, it was like, oh, well, that's your weakness, right? So you better figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, hold
Mhm.
on.
Mhm.
What are the possibilities if I spent my energy on that little niche,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
That I
Yeah.
know how to
Mhm.
do really well.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
think that's
And
the pivot that needs to happen.
And we see this still in corporate work, that the performance evaluations, the one-on-ones are often focused on, well, we got to fix this, or this is where
Right.
your development needs to be. And that is okay if it's taken from that compassionate perspective,
Mhm.
because we do have places where we could be better at what we're doing.
Yeah.
And being able to see those, maybe because we don't see them, we did have the blinders on, is valuable. But having them brought to our attention, or bringing that forward in a course or a program because it's been recognized by the team, we all need to work on this,
Right.
can be done in a very positive manner instead.
Yeah. Yeah. I also want to bring up something, Colin, that you brought up in our conversations behind the scenes. We have regular, not just business conversations together, but we're also dreaming and imagining as we're developing our programming and our coach training and our leadership training. We have some incredible conversations. And one of the things, Colin, that you brought up was about the and kind of looking at that little slice of time, let's say for the last 40 years, where there's kind of been a separation from wisdom teachings and timeless, and what someone, Adrienne Marie Brown, calls emergent strategy. And for something to emerge, Carol, what does it mean again?
So emergent means arising from.
Arising from. Yeah. So it's like a collective wisdom. And, and that's something that is lacking in a lot of development programs, to be honest.
Yeah.
Totally. It's kind of like the last 30 years, or I guess 30 or so, that I've been, I did my MBA and all that stuff, right? It's like it's almost like it was based on a sports club, right? Like it was based on kind of modernity, right?
Yeah.
And not looking back, and maybe the history books and the biographies and things like that are where to start. But things, the leadership development of modernity, I think, no longer suits 2024.
Right.
And however we want to look at through whichever prism, you have to go back in time, because there have been great leaders and great lessons, right, from those eras, and wisdom. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the leadership in the last 30 or 40 years has been a bit of a blood sport, just a bit gruesome.
The competitiveness. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very competitive. And
very
it feels as
divisive.
though, divisive, competitive. That's your team. This is my team. This is how we're going to tackle each other. And today, I feel like today it's time for cooperation and not competition. As we enter this new era of Aquarius, and we don't go here, but that's,
that competitive nature had leaders vying against each other. And I recall being shocked recently of talking to a leader who literally was being thrown under the bus by his team, not invited to meetings where it was mandatory.
Right.
They didn't put it in his calendar. Like, they were really setting him up for failure. So I think addressing that underlying sense of scarcity, which we've talked about a lot in our various conversations, is part of it. But it is also inviting that wisdom you're speaking about, Colin. And I know when I started coaching back in 2006, 2007, you could not talk about spirituality. That was like, there were certain topics that were off the table. You did not bring that into a professional conversation. And that is when we look at what is emerging as professional development now, spirituality is a big piece of it. Recognizing our humanity,
our wholeness, right? Like that. It's not like there's certain, we are whole, but whole does not mean we're a pie. Whole means you're always whole, right? There's not these segmented areas of our lives, and that old way of seeing, of seeing how we develop as leaders is that this element of who I am is reserved for this part of my life, rather than seeing literally the emergent thing, whatever's rising is a part of who I am. One of the things that I see now, and I've become much more sensitive to it in the last couple of years has been the idea of how we are still very exclusionary in how we view leadership. It's still very ableist. It still lacks diversity of thought, diversity of experience, diversity of race, diversity of age, right? Like we tend to even, I think, in our culture, in our Western culture, we tend to idolize youth. And I want to just put a little asterisk on that. And I'm not saying, because I work with a lot of young adults, and I love the passion and the fervency, and the passion of youth does change the world. But we do become enamored with that, and we tend to think that that's where the best energy and the best ideas come from. We prioritize those voices in many ways, where, again, that emergent view of things is like everything belongs. Every voice belongs. There's room there's room for everybody at this table. Right. And our Western colonized perspective has been like, you belong only here or here or here. It's like you're assigned to places, but leadership development.
I see it a lot like this idea of it feels like we're addicted, right, to new. Right?
Yeah.
New. Sorry, I interrupted you there, but
no, it's good. Yeah, it's true.
That idea of elders, right, not being looked at for solutions, to me is a symptom of this addiction to new, have new, get more, that growth, more new, bring it in, buy it, consume it.
Yeah.
And it happens in leadership, I think, as well, leadership development.
Well, and if you think of what would an ideal leadership table look like, I think it has that kind of combination. There's that collaborative, we did do this 30 years ago. It's like, what worked about that?
I have such a good example of this.
Oh, good.
From basically yesterday, in my little town here, somebody spoke up online about how she is totally misrepresented in town council and about decisions, and there's a noise bylaw thing going on, and she's 20. Okay.
Oh,
and
that is so
beautiful thing the beautiful thing that happened was everybody's like, you have to run, come on, like be that voice. And I think what you just said, you guys, is so important, this idea of old and new and everything there. That's so
everything
exciting.
Belongs.
Everything belongs. And one of the things that we've also spoken about in the past, privately, but I don't even think we have it on our website, but this idea of remember who you are and who you will be. Right. And if you begin to think of that, and imagine kind of the possibilities and the centeredness that can bring you, I think.
Oh, yes.
Away from competition.
So Colin, that's good. Thank you for taking us there. So let's take this to that place about remembering who we are and who we will be. And what do we see, and what do we recognize as emerging in the type of leadership development programs and training, both personal and collectively, for organizations and teams, that is not only is it working like sufficient, but like that is actually like vibrant and that is whole? What are the elements of that?
Well, I want to just bring forward what you brought to us, Crystal, which is métissage. For our listeners who have not heard of it, it is an amazing
process,
ability to have a conversation, to be sharing a story, to be listening to each other in a different way. And I think that is the key piece to this element of leadership development, is the idea that everyone belongs and everything belongs. So that when there is shared stories, when there is shared experience, there is an honoring of what is being spoken. Not because it's the elder speaking or it's the president speaking, but because the person, whoever it is, whether it's the 20-year-old or the 70-year-old, has value, and we're going to get something from it.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? That's actually such a great point. And perhaps we will do an episode about that in the future, walking through the process of métissage and what we have gleaned from doing it. And just a quick note, it's as a Métis woman, I learned about métissage, but it is not an exclusionary Métis practice. But it is a fantastic way for people to understand their story within the greater story of what they're building. And it's
such a
really a beautiful, powerful experience.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's just so applicable to everything.
Yeah.
And the only thing I might add into the kind of the equation, and maybe we could talk about this in another podcast too, is I think when you spoke about everyone and everything, I think what we do need to add more of is adding elements of, I don't know, maybe not spirituality, but looking at things like nutrition, looking at things like your health, looking at things like addiction, looking at like, because people come into these spaces, right? Whether it's the office or whether it's a coaching session or a leadership development thing. And I think sometimes we forget a little bit of the human side. Like, what are they bringing into the room? So I think as us three play around with the future of leadership development, I think it has to go beyond the room, beyond that space, that container where we might focus on something. But hey, what's going on at home? What are you getting enough sleep? Are you getting enough attrition? Attrition. You know, are there things that we should look at and guide you and point you in the direction of, you know, addiction? Sort of, I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
but
I hear you on that. And, you know, so it's interesting. While you were saying that, Colin, I wrote down, what does whole mean? That is, you know, and to help people understand, if you think about it, whole does not mean perfect. And whole means that literally what we just said earlier, everything belongs. So I'm a whole human. So there are stories and there are elements of me that are thriving. There are some that are a work in progress. At certain times there are parts that are hurting or that are not at their full capacity. But it does not affect or change the unchanging, ineffable fact that I am a whole human.
Yes.
And everything belongs in that. And so when we're talking about leadership development programs, we cannot talk about successful programs without talking about what coaching does. And I will not apologize for that ever. What the elements of learning how to coach does for your team, but it also does for you as a leader. Carol, can you just share with us just a couple thoughts that you would have around that?
Well, sure. I mean, part of what we've seen in leadership development and professional development programs is that they're wonderful when they happen and then the door closes and people go away and it gets lost. And the element of bringing coaching into that arena is that it continues to propel and sustain and build traction for people who have learned lessons or learned things they want to incorporate into their life. But as leaders, what we learn when we examine a little bit of coaching, and you don't have to take a full year-long coach training program, is how to listen well, how to ask questions that are important, and how to be present with another human being.
Right.
And those leadership skills cannot ever be discounted. That is what will make a memorable leader. And we've had this conversation, and I invite anybody who's listening to think about a leader who was the best one in your life.
Yeah.
Weren't those qualities there? Didn't they listen? Didn't they ask great questions? And weren't they there for you as a whole human yourself? Those are the aspects.
Yeah.
And instead of telling you what to do or think, they pushed you to think more and further and bigger and wider. That was the thing, right?
Yeah. So I think that where we're landing with this is less about all the like tactical elements that leadership development programs need to have, and they do need to have them. But really, if you are someone who is considering either taking a leadership development program, you're looking for something for your team or for your organization. A couple elements, or some of the elements that we've been talking about, are essential elements to create and build and generate a culture in your organization that reflects the type of leaders that you believe you're capable of being.
We call it reclaiming leadership.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a very powerful program.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should we speak about the people that we're going to have guests on in the,
Yes.
in the next couple of months?
Let's
Exactly
just
on
wrap up
this
that
topic.
one thought right there. The reclaiming leadership. If you are someone who's interested in that, you can find out more with us. Either reach out to us at wholehumancoaching.com. We run those programs and through coaching and training with organizations, and we from time to time also have open sessions for people to join. So stay tuned, because we're going to be announcing some upcoming again. Now let's talk about our
Season two.
Season 2, yes. So we are today wraps up season 1. 40 is a nice number for a lot of reasons to wrap up season 1. Season 2 is coming, and we're having more of the good stuff and just even more good stuff. So Colin, tell us a little bit about what's coming up in season 2.
Well, I think we were safe in season 1. We played it safe. We were all super nice and coachy, and as it should be. But we all kind of realized at the end of season 1 that we needed to be stronger, more in our power, bring more people in, have conversations that are deeper and wider and harder and gritty, because this era requires it. So I think we're going to have a punchier season in a good way. I think we're inviting guests on to look at different angles of leadership as well, even around food or food sovereignty, and what about leadership in that industry. And I think we're going to have some guests back, like Amanda Ring, to discuss, rewriting leadership. So it's going to be a fun season. A lot more. We what is that word when you say you figured things out? We learned the ropes last season.
We did.
We're gonna take off with all of you.
Yes, we're also going to be learning, listening, and inviting some of our clients on. We're going to be doing some live sessions here, and those are really powerful learning sessions, because learning, just experiencing and participating in something like that can be an incredible opportunity. So.
And we might not stick to 20 minutes anymore like last season.
Clearly,
we've got more to say. That's what it is.
We got more to say.
Exactly.
So grab your second coffee, I guess.
Yes, exactly. Well, thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to the days ahead. And don't forget, if you enjoyed today's episode, like it, subscribe to us, either and on YouTube and over on any podcast listener that you use, and share this episode with someone that you think could use it, because you never know how your little seeds of light and love are going to change the world. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.